I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coaster Wars podcast, where today we are going to be talking about coasters that we have not ridden. I don't know why. This is going to be fun, I guess. We'll see how this goes.
It is going to be fun because these are defunct coasters that we haven't ridden, so no matter how hard we try, we'll never be able to get these credits. So I think it'll be fun to talk about some coasters that we never have ridden and never will get a chance to ride, but we wish we could have gotten a ride on.
Two infamous coasters in the roller coaster world, I would say. One for sure. The other one is a little more obscure, but...
Gabe picked mine out for me, so I didn't even know anything about it until I started researching it. So thank you, Gabe.
Well, we were trying to think, and then you're like, well, I could talk about Dueling Dragons. I'm like, we kind of already did that.
Yep.
And then I was like, we could talk about like a couple other coasters. And then this one popped into my head, and I was like, oh, perfect.
Yeah, especially because we're both doing launch coasters, so that's fun.
Yes. Oh, we are. Oh, well, we planned that one, definitely. Totally.
And they both opened in the same year too, which is funny.
And they're the same launch system.
Yeah.
That actually worked out kind of interesting, I guess.
It did. Why don't you introduce our coasters?
Okay. In the red corner, standing at a height of 200 feet and reaching a top speed of 65 miles per hour, hailing from the state of New Jersey and the premier gym, it is Batman and Robin. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 155 feet and reaching a top speed of 70 miles per hour, hailing from the state of Virginia and the Intamin Gym, it is Volcano. Let the fight begin. So I am bringing Volcano the Blast Coaster to this episode. This is like a dream coaster that I wish I could have ridden. Obviously, it shut down in 2018, or it was removed in 2018, and it is no longer operating, and they finally tore it out. So, but that is the coaster that I wish I could have ridden.
And I am bringing, the full name of this ride is Batman and Robin the Chiller. And like I said, Gabe kind of picked this coaster out for me, but after looking at it, it looked like a pretty wild time. And this guy opened in 1998 and only operated until 2007. It sounds like, as cool as this thing looked, it sounds like it was a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah, they had a lot of issues with Batman and Robin. I mean, both these coasters had a lot of issues, but specifically Batman and Robin the Chiller. I believe at one point only one side was operating, and at one point only the other side was operating. But yeah, I do believe though the top speeds on both these coasters are the launch speeds.
Yep.
If I'm correct. Batman and Robin the Chiller is actually two dueling coasters, two shuttle coasters, and each side is about 1,200 feet long, but then you go through the layout twice. And then both, or I should say all three, are LIM magnetic launch coasters. So this is the original magnetic launch system before people transitioned into the LSM, which is a more powerful and more reliable launch system.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, both these coasters are the same, but very different. Very different.
Yes. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about Volcano, because that's a little more simple, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I will say I did not do any research on Gabe's coaster, but I did watch a POV, and this thing looked absolutely insane, and I agree with him. It is a shame that we did not get to ride this roller coaster.
Yeah, so Volcano the Blast Coaster gets its name because it was constructed inside of a fake volcano, literally. And like the coaster shoots out the top of the volcano. So that's where it kind of got its name from. This was a very infamous roller coaster at King's Dominion, and a lot of people were very upset when they finally took this out in 2018. But it did make it 20 years. So that is saying a lot for the maintenance department at King's Dominion to keep this
Yeah.
thing running. But it uses the same launch system as the Intamin Impulse coasters. Those are the shuttle coasters like Wicked Twister, the ones that kind of just go back and forth. However,
Mhm.
they took that launch system and put it on a full layout, that a full circuit coaster. Um,
Oh,
and they
okay.
called it their suspended catapult coaster. So
Huh.
that's the biggest difference between these two, is that Volcano the Blast coaster is technically an invert.
Okay.
Yeah, where Batman and Robin would be just a normal train from
Yep.
Premiere.
Yep. I
But yeah,
did
this
see
coaster,
on RCDB that it was the first launched invert, which is really interesting.
yeah. So technically, I think the impulse coasters that they call them come first, but they
Okay.
didn't consider. It's kind of a weird thing because they were shuttle coasters. They weren't a full circuit. It's one of those kind of like weird things, you know what I'm saying, in the roller
Like a
coaster
very technical,
world.
like even though they were technically hanging from the track, those ones weren't full circuits. We're not going to call it an invert.
Yeah. But yeah, so this coaster was very, very infamous in the amusement park world. It's been on my list that I wish I could have ridden. Like, if I had a time machine, this would be one of the coasters I'd travel back in time to go ride. It's just, it's one of those things where it's like, as a roller coaster enthusiast, you know about this roller coaster.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about beforehand, or?
No, why don't you just get into the layout and then we'll kind of discuss that.
All right, so this roller coaster starts with a roll out of the station onto the initial launch track, and it launches you. I don't think it's quite the top speed, but then you shoot out from underneath the mountain and you do a full 180-degree turn before hitting the second launch system. And I think that's where they had a lot of issues with this roller coaster, is with that second launch. So it's like you get the initial launch and it gets you up to like probably like 50 miles per hour or something like that,
Okay.
and then you come out of the mountain, you do a 180-degree turn, you go back into the mountain, and you go through a rolling launch, which gets you to that top 70-mile-per-hour speed.
Dang.
And I'm thinking that's probably where they had most of the issues. But this sends you up vertically out of the top of the volcano, and you do what's called a rollout element. And this was supposed to be the best moment on the ride. It's a very whippy, very forceful moment.
Mhm.
So after coming back down, you do a panoramic turn at the top of the mountain, and you go through the first of 3 heartline rolls. So you go through the first heartline roll and you continue to turn, and you really don't go towards the ground. So all 3 of these heartline rolls are taken at a slower speed,
Mhm.
because even though your top height is 155 feet, your top drop height's only 85 feet, and you don't go through that drop until the end of the roller coaster. So you stay really up high, you go through the second heartline roll, and this takes you right next to the mountain, and it gets a good little near miss moment before turning back to the right. You go through the third heartline roll, and then you turn back to the right and dive towards the ground, and this is where you do that biggest drop, and it sends you back into the mountain where you hit the final brakes. So it's not a very complicated layout, I will say that.
Yeah, when I was watching the POV, I so like I said, I did no research on this, and I'm like, well, I just want a little bit of background before going into this. I was watching the POV, and I was like, oh, Heartline roll, cool. And I was like, wait, there's another Heartline roll, and I was like, wait, there's a third Heartline roll. So then I had to look up the stats on RCDB, and I was like, dang, it just has a bunch of Heartline rolls, but it give it's like any coaster. We like when you say it out loud, it sounds like a very simple layout, but when you actually watch a POV of you going through this layout, he's so right that it just kind of seems like it whips you in and out of these transitions. And then like a lot of the times when you come out of these heartline rolls, they instead of stopping you completely back vertical again, kind of swings you all the way around into like banked turn where you're almost 90 degrees again. So I can imagine it's not like you go through a hotline roll and then you go into a straight piece of track. You're going right into a corner. And so it keeps you guessing, and it looked like a whole lot of fun to ride this coaster.
Well, the biggest thing is it's all done at elevation. So like, especially like the first 2, you're way up in the air. So when
Mm-hmm.
you get when you go and you flip upside down and you're looking at the ground, you're quite a bit high up. And the second Heartline roll has some really good near misses, but this roller coaster is really all about the launch and that initial rollout element,
Mm-hmm.
because you are literally sent vertically up out of this volcano. So it's dark and stuff. You can't really see. And then you're literally shot out of a mountain. Like, and that's what this was all about, was that 70-mile-per-hour launch followed by that element. The rest of the coaster is just kind of bonus after that.
I will
But yeah,
say, I appreciate, as the theming queen, I appreciate the theming and the fact that they literally actually just shot you out of the top of Volcano. I could just imagine that in and of itself is just such a fun time. It reminds me so much of the elevator lift in Lagoon. That was just so entertaining every single time you did it. Even if the rest of the ride wasn't there, I mean, just that element in and of itself must have been so much fun experience.
yeah, it really truly was the highlight of this roller coaster. And, for that, I kind of appreciate the simplicity of it. It's a volcano, it shoots you out of a volcano. Like, it's not very complicated. This is a very intimate ride. Like, just clear cut, fun, entertainment, and then just like obvious theming. And just, I thought, like I said, this is when I wanted to do this episode. This is the first coaster that came to mind. And for me, I would love to get on this thing and ride it and experience everything it had to offer. The other thing, too, is that you do go in and out of that mountain several times. It's not just one time. And then just the fact that it's a launch coaster. I mean, come on. I love launch coasters. They're my favorite, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And at 70-mile-per-hour launch, I'm sure it was pretty punchy.
Oh, heck yeah. I absolutely actually, I think. I mean, any launch, even if they're slower ones, have some kind of bite to them because you're just accelerated to a faster speed than you're used to. I mean, even drops on like big coasters, it takes a couple seconds to get up to that speed, where with any kind of launch, you're just like almost instantly there. And just think of going from 0 to 70 in like a couple seconds. That had to have had some punch to it.
So, just talking about some of the issues that this coaster had that led to its removal, is it had frequent malfunctions and breakdowns with the launch system.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what would happen is it would go through the launch, the initial launch, and then it would go into the second one, and it wouldn't make it out of the top of the mountain. It would basically roll back.
Oh.
And basically what would happen is when Intamin designed this coaster, they really didn't design a good way to get people safely back to the station
Oh gosh.
after a rollback. Basically, it would stop and everybody would be fine, but then they'd have to do an emergency evacuation, as far as
Yeah.
what I understood. There was no way to like get it, because there was two different launch tracks, and that was
Okay.
the issue, was
Oh.
getting, because like they couldn't just roll the coaster back
Yeah.
into the station and like relaunch it,
Mhm.
from what I understand. So whenever
Okay.
they had a rollback, they would have to go and get everybody off the train and then probably move it back manually and
Mhm.
then like retest it and stuff. It was probably a whole process every time it happened.
Yeah.
There was also supposedly some riders reported injuries from debris
Oh.
hitting them. I don't know how true that is. But yeah, so basically people were getting stuck on the ride. The ride wasn't making it all the way through the layout. And then it was just a maintenance nightmare at the end,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Especially these LIM coasters, they're known to have issues. Like
Mhm.
even some of the other LIM launch systems that we see, even like on Flight of Fear and stuff like that, where it does have problems, and especially the more intense launches.
Yep.
Um, and it's just, that's what it came down to, is it was a maintenance issue. It was starting to fail launches more and more often, and it was just costing the park a lot of money, and that's why they decided to remove it. But man, is it a darn shame. It's a
Yeah.
darn shame they had to remove this coaster.
Oh yeah, it would have been so much fun to ride. And speaking of the LIMs, I mean that's what my coaster was, and it was basically the same thing. It was a absolute maintenance nightmare, and that's basically why I got shut down as well. So I'm bringing Batman and Robin the Chiller, which was a dueling LIM shuttle looping coaster from Premier Rides that opened in 1998, operated until 2007 at Six Flags Great Adventure. And as Gabe said before, this is actually a dueling coaster. So there were two sides, the Batman side or the blue side, and then Robin the red side. And they both had two elements that you went through. And then it had, since it was a shuttle coaster, you basically went up a spike and came back down and did the whole layout backwards and then came back into the station. And this thing looked really intimidating. Just all the pictures of the supports for this thing looked so cool. And I'm so glad that Gabe picked this. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. Picked me out this one to research. Goodness gracious.
But basically, what this coaster is they built the Mr. Freeze Blast coasters. They built one in Texas and they
Yeah.
built one in St. Louis. They're clones of each other. What this was the custom iteration that they built for Great Adventure. Because
Yeah.
obviously, Great Adventure doesn't do anything normal.
No, they do not.
So when they were talking to Premiere about getting a launch coaster in the same style as the other two, they said, well, we have to go bigger and we have to be better than everybody else. So they're like, well, let's just build two of them.
Oh yeah. So to talk about the layouts for this ride, as this one is remarkably simple as well. So the Batman side, it launches you at 65 miles per hour and then basically sends you through a top hat. But instead of being on the outside like King to Call or Top Thrill, you're actually on the inside of the top hat and it flips you upside down. And then it sends you through, it was a 0G roll, and then that brings you into the spike. And then, like I said, it just sends you backwards. So then you go through the 0G stall back, or 0G stall, 0G roll backwards. And then you go through that top hat backwards and land back in the station. For the Robin side, you actually go through a Cobra roll instead. And again, Cobra Roll sends you through a 0G roll, and then you're up into the spike, and then you go through the whole thing backwards. And I want to say something too is I say spike, but it wasn't completely vertical. It was at maybe like a 45-degree angle, and it had its own LIM launch system on that. It didn't launch you to that full speed. The top speed of this is 65 miles per hour, did not launch you nearly as fast from that tops one. I forget what the numbers were, but it was like 30 some motors that were on the initial launch that launched you to 65, and then on the spike it was only like 7 that launched you backwards. Could you imagine getting
Yeah,
launched?
so that 65-mile-an-hour top speed is the initial launch. All those The only thing those boosters for on the spike was to get you far enough up the spike so you had enough momentum to get through the rest of the layout backwards.
Okay, that makes
That's
sense.
all it was. So basically, you rolled up into the spike and it just kind of boosted you up a little bit higher, and then you would roll back through, and then you do the entire layout backwards. Now, I will say this: the Cobra roll, doing that backwards sounds insane
Oh yeah.
because it is a huge element, like just on the pictures. But even that top hat had to be freaking crazy.
Oh yeah. So from what I got from the stats, so the height of this thing for both sides was 200 feet, but it says the drop for the Batman side was 139. So that must have been coming off of the top top hat. It must have been 139 feet. Well, for Robin, it was 104 feet. So you got to think of how a Cobra roll looks. The drop that they're quote unquote must be talking about must be off the tail end of that Cobra roll, which that would be like the whole, so that means the whole thing was like over 100 feet in the air, which is crazy. And then like Gabe said, to do the whole thing backwards, Oh my gosh, this thing must have been so much fun. And I could just imagine the line must have moved so fast on this thing because it was such a short ride. And it was at a Six Flags park when they just got like the rights, the so what had happened is Premier Parks had just recently bought the Six Flags chain and as such got like the licensing for the DC characters and had been moving them out to the rest of their parks. And they had timed the release of this ride along with the Mr. Freeze coasters to coincide with the releasing of the Batman and Robin movie. It was supposed to come out in 1997, but they had so many issues with the launch systems and stuff. The Mr. Freeze coasters didn't open at all, and this one opened literally for like a couple weeks and then was down for the rest of the season and didn't have
Yeah.
like an official full season open until 1998. But where I was going with this whole rant was the theming would have been awesome on this thing. And they built like the whole Mr. Freeze, like I think it was his laboratory or something, or his like warehouse or whatever that you would walk through as your queue line. And then they had the big Batman and Robin observatory built in it too, which actually technically is still standing in the park today. They just have kind of taken all of the roller coaster theming out of it. But it looked like it was going to be a lot of fun. And I'm kind of
Oh, I
sad I didn't
know.
get to ride it.
But yeah, so that 200-foot mark would be the top of the spikes. So the
Okay.
coaster really never reached that, like the train never really reached that height ever. But that's how they got the 200-foot number. Would have been the top of the spikes because it had to be that tall in order to get back through the Cobra Roll and the inverted top hat. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had enough momentum to get back through those elements
Mhm.
backwards. That's the part that I just is like, and that's the reason why I want to get on those Batman, or not the Batman, the Chiller rides. I'm hoping
Mhm.
to get to St. Louis next summer, but I have a feeling those might be two coasters that are on the chopping block in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
I definitely
honestly.
want to get on one of them just so I can kind of experience it, because I believe the Mr. Freeze coasters are the inverted top hat,
I
if
didn't
I
do
remember
much
correctly.
research into that. I don't know the exact layout, but I do know that they run them backwards now, so you experience them backwards.
Well, it's another shuttle coaster.
Oh, well, so cuz when I was doing research, all of them say that they're Mr. Freeze the reverse or whatever.
Yeah, some of them had a backwards launch, but they're all shuttle coasters. So you go through the layout forwards, and then you
Oh.
go through the layout backwards. It's just
Okay.
I think the one in Texas, I think at one point all of them launched backwards.
I think you're right. Yes, that's what I was gathering. Because I watched a video and it kind of mentioned them a little bit, but it was mostly on Batman and Robin and kind of why that closed down. And yeah, so they were originally called Mr. Freeze and then they renamed them Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. And it's like Gabe said, the initial launch is backwards now instead of forwards, which agree with you would be amazing to experience.
Yes. But yeah, that's definitely on my list. The closest one to me is St. Louis, so that's probably the one I'm going to go to next summer. I want to go to Six Flags St. Louis. It's on my list of parks I want to go to next year.
I I know I didn't even know there was one in St. Louis, and like that is so close to actually so close to where me and Gabe call home. So it's kind of baffling that we haven't been there yet.
Yeah, like I said, it's been on my list. It's just I haven't been able to make it there. There's the Mr. Freeze, there's the Boss, there's a couple other coasters there that are on my list I want to ride. But
Well, getting back to Batman and Robin the Chiller, as we can get into basically why this roller coaster closed down. Of course, the initial issues are all centered around the LIM launch system. They're very notorious for being maintenance nightmares, and they also take a whole honking amount of electricity. And so when this ride was initially slated to open, like I said, they had issues. It opened in 1997 at the beginning of the season, and they ended up having to close it down and like do a whole bunch of work on the LIMs. Well, part of the issue was they were having what are called brownouts that was affecting not only the park but also like the surrounding neighborhoods every time they would launch this coaster because it's a dueling launch coaster, so they weren't just launching one train, they were launching two simultaneously. And just a small note here, if someone doesn't know what a brownout is, because I didn't know what a brownout was, it's basically when all the lights and stuff flicker, like the voltage drops way down, but it's not like a complete blackout. You don't lose full power. But it was affecting literally entire sections of the park or even surrounding neighborhoods to the park. So that was an issue. And
Yeah, that's
then
kind of a problem, isn't it?
yeah, just slightly. So that kind of led to them only launching at least one train at a time, which ruined the dueling effect, which is another really interesting aspect of this roller coaster. A lot of dueling coasters obviously are designed to be dueling coasters, and so when you take away that dueling effect, it really kind of ruins a part of this ride. And so, like Gabe was saying too, what ended up happening was the Robin side is the side that had the Cobra roll, and I think a lot of people must have liked that side better. Just speculation here, but so the Batman side would be the side that was oftentimes closed down. And what it was too is they were basically using the Batman side as spare parts so they could run the Robin side. And so oftentimes Batman was a very rare credit if it was opened. And there were even times where an entire season it wouldn't run at all. And so then, yeah, it just became a maintenance nightmare. And then they also had the same issue Gabe was talking about with Volcano the Blast Coaster, is it would valley out. And so it would oftentimes do that either before the 0G roll, or sometimes the Robin side would literally stall inside the Cobra roll. And same thing, there's really no way to like get it back to the station. So they had to evacuate the passengers and then literally get a crane and remove the trains from where they were stuck and then put them on the regular track. So with all of these issues and not being able to run it as a dueling coaster and the amount of power that it took, it was just eventually slated for demolishment. It was apparently bought and moved to a park in Colombia.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, but it was never assembled. And so I was watching a video on this coaster and the guy said that there are two speculations on why it's never been assembled. And now one is the more practical answer, is that they did not realize the amount of maintenance this thing was going to take. And so they bought it and went, oh crap. And they just never put it together. But as like a funny, like almost conspiracy theory, is that they lost the blueprints for it and now they can't put it back together.
That would be funny.
It would be hilarious, actually. But yeah, so that is the story of Batman and Robin the Chiller. It looked like it would have been such a fun time, a really great credit to get at Great Adventure, and I'm really sad that I have not been able to ride this coaster because it looks like a lot of fun.
It seems like to me that happens to a lot of dueling coasters where like they lose the dueling aspect and then they just get torn out. I mean, that happened to Dueling Dragons, or maybe not necessarily torn out, but then they just kind of lose their initial charm or whatever you want to call it, their initial draw. Happened to Twisted Colossus. It happened to Dueling Dragons. It's kind of happening to the Eagle.
Yeah.
The Eagle doesn't race anymore. The last time I was there, they were running both sides, but they couldn't send both trains at the same time. So, and that's really disappointing when that happens, because when you get on a coaster that has two tracks like this, you expect it to duel. You expect it to race, or whatever word you want to use. So when that doesn't happen, I can see that being incredibly disappointing.
I 100% agree. It's usually half the charm with any kind of dueling coaster is just that interaction with the other train. And so it really is a shame not to have that as part of this ride. And like Gabe said, just from there, it loses ridership. I mean, maintenance sounds like it was crazy on this thing. So unfortunately, it had to go. And I think from the video, what was it? Avengers Battle for Metropolis, that like indoor dark ride is what ended up taking its place. So,
yep.
But
with that,
yeah,
I think it's time to pick a winner. I'll allow you the brain fart. Okay, whatever. I'll allow you to go first. I'll allow you the honor. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, so as much as Batman and Chiller looked like a really cool ride, Volcano the Blast Coaster looked freaking awesome. So I'm gonna go with your coaster this week, Gabe. That thing looks so cool, and I'm so sad that I'm never gonna get to ride it.
See, now that's hilarious, because actually after talking about the two roller coasters, I'm gonna pick Batman and Robin. And the only reason I'm going to pick it is because if I could have gotten on it like when it originally opened with the forwards and the backwards part of it and being able to see both sides run at the same time, I think in that aspect, it being a dueling coaster. I mean, both these coasters, don't get me wrong, Volcano and Batman the Robin are very, very close. But I'm actually going to choose Batman and Robin in this one, which is hilarious because I picked it for you.
Yeah, that is actually hilarious.
I mean, both coasters are definitely high up in the coasters I wish I could have ridden, but I think just the dueling aspect, just because I never got to ride Dueling Dragons, like all the good dueling coasters I never got to ride. It's unfair.
We are those weirdos that would build a time machine and then only use it to go back in time and ride roller coasters that we haven't ridden.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so that brings us to the end of this episode. Why don't we get into our future episodes? So our next episode, directly after this, is going to be defunct coasters we have ridden. So we're going to talk about some ones that unfortunately are no longer there, but we have gotten a chance to ride. And one of these Gabe has ridden, and the other one we have both ridden. So that'll be an interesting one. And then our next special episode coming up is going to be our Question Everything, focusing on ride elements and forces. I will be quizzing Gabe, and he said it's going to be a fun one, trying to explain ride elements without being able to show you a picture. So tune in for that.
That'll be interesting. That'll either be really funny or really boring. We'll see.
I'll try to make it interesting.
Okay.
And then to go out a little bit into the future, we have our next episode after that will be another battles episode. And we're going to do our favorite mine cars / mine trains, which that one actually should be kind of interesting. I think that'll be fun. And then we're going to have our Coasters 101 on Intimate specifically. We're going to cover everything in Intimate, anything Intimate. And that should be fun because Intimate is a crazy company. They've done some crazy
there's
things.
A lot to unpack there too. I'm thinking we're gonna probably come up with another battle episode in between there though.
Okay.
Because I kind of like this 2 episodes of battle, then a special episode, then 2 episodes of battle, then a special episode. So we might move up the custom layout arrows.
Okay.
We could move that up in front of the Coasters 101. I don't know. We'll see. That might change. So,
we'll figure it out.
Yes. Or maybe janky but fun. We can move that one up because that's going to be a good episode.
Yes. All right. With that, thank you for tuning in and listening, everybody. Remember, you can email us at coasterwarspodcast@gmail.com with any suggestions or any questions for our Question Everything episode. And of course, we're up on the socials, Facebook, X, and Instagram. But thank you for listening, and see y'all next week.
I hope you guys all have a great day.